monstrum, a thing or person that is strange but not necessarily evil. Landmarks, regions, bodies of water, mountains and cities are naturally categorized as places. One particularly interesting aspect of mythological characters and places is the degree to which they resist strict categorization. Inevitably, the categories overlap, as in cases where a human hero becomes divine, or a river is conceived of both as a geographic feature and as a divine personification of the river. Hercules and Asclepius are examples of the former, the Peneus and Achelous rivers are examples of the latter. Gaia was the earth, and also the earth goddess. The hunter Orion was a giant, being in this respect a prodigy or monster, but he was neither entirely mortal, nor was he entirely divine. Satyrs, hybrid creatures that most would classify as monsters, were at the same time woodland spirits, and so on. Varying spellings and pronunciations of a given character's name went hand in hand with varying, sometimes conflicting traditions concerning their lives and exploits. The myths themselves, as well as the characters in them, evolved over millennia. When confronted with variants and conflicts, it is important to remember that many or most myths were transmitted orally at some stage, being influenced by cultural shifts and factors such as depictions in art. One example is the cycle of myths surrounding the Trojan War. It has long been known that these tales had their origins in the Bronze Age, very roughly 1800 to 1150 BCE, the time of the Trojan War itself. And yes, there was a Trojan War, or more properly, a number of Trojan Wars. Aspects of the story of Achilles, as well as of his comrades and adversaries, so familiar from Homer's Iliad, were at the time when it was committed to writing, perhaps 750 BCE or later, hundreds of years old, having been passed on orally previously, and doubtless altered, at least to some degree, with each telling. In those hundreds of years, the Greek world had changed dramatically, witnessing the flowering and fall of powerful kingdoms, a dark age, and the birth of city-states no longer governed by monarchs. Not all variants of the myths surrounding the characters and places featured in this book have been documented here. The particular details included are derived from what today are the best-known sources of Greek and Roman myths, among them Homer, Hesiod, Apollonius of Rhodes, Virgil and Ovid, all of them authors of epic poetry, the lyric poets Sappho, Stesichorus, Pindar, and Bacchylides, the tragedians Aeschylus, Sophocles and Euripides, the historian Herodotus, the geographer Strabo, the travel writer and ethnographer Pausanias, the natural historian Pliny the Elder, and the mythographers Apollodorus and Hyginus. A number of these authors recorded more than one version of a given myth, even when they themselves were sceptical about some of them. In the spirit of Diodorus Siculus, 1st century BCE, who relates several alternate versions of the origins of the Pillars of Hercules, namely that Hercules created them to memorialize his extraordinary journey to the edges of the world as a means by which to prevent sea monsters from penetrating the Mediterranean from the ocean beyond, or to create a channel allowing ships to pass between the seas. I invite listeners to select the versions most entertaining, credible, or far-fetched. Part 1. Gods, Goddesses, Spirits, and Nymphs. Achelous was a river, and at the same time the god of that river, which was one of the longest and most voluminous in Greece. While on the one hand associated with a specific river, this god could be invoked when making reference to rivers and their gods in general. In other words, he could be invoked as the god of all rivers. According to the Greek poet Hesiod, Achelous, along with a host of other rivers, was a child of the elemental Titan gods Oceanus and Tethys. His own children included the lovely-voiced but monstrous sirens, as well as a number of nymphs, who were said to draw their water from him.